It started with a single strike, and now, the entire Middle East is on the edge of collapse. Iran and Israel are at war, missiles are flying, cities are burning, and innocent lives are caught in the crossfire. But behind the scenes, one global superpower is pulling the strings. Is this the beginning of a wider war? Or the countdown to something far worse? Stay with us, the truth is more dangerous than you think. How the war began: tensions between Iran and Israel. The hostility between Iran and Israel is rooted in decades of political, religious, and strategic rivalry. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran has positioned itself as a staunch opponent of Israel's existence, regularly calling for the liberation of Palestine and supporting anti-Israel militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. In turn, Israel has viewed Iran not just as a geopolitical rival, but as an existential threat. Over the years, this rivalry played out in indirect ways: cyber warfare, assassinations of nuclear scientists, shadow wars in Syria and Iraq, and economic sanctions. One major point of tension has been Iran's ongoing effort to develop its nuclear program. Iran claims it's for peaceful energy use, but Israel, and many in the West, believe it's a cover for building a nuclear bomb. Israel has consistently warned that it will not allow Iran to become a nuclear-armed state. In past years, it carried out covert operations, like the assassination of Iranian scientists and sabotage of enrichment facilities, to slow down Iran's progress. However, by early 2025, Israeli intelligence reported that Iran had moved dangerously close to achieving weapons-grade uranium enrichment levels, despite international inspections and negotiations. Fearing that diplomacy had failed and the world was not acting fast enough, Israel took matters into its own hands. In March 2025, Israel launched a coordinated, surprise airstrike on Iran's most secure nuclear sites, Natanz and Fordow. These sites, buried deep underground and heavily fortified, were considered nearly untouchable. Yet, using advanced bunker-busting munitions and real-time satellite guidance, possibly with covert assistance, Israel inflicted massive damage on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Iran's response was swift and aggressive. Within hours, Tehran ordered its missile units to strike Israeli military bases, airfields, and civilian areas. Rockets landed near Tel Aviv, Haifa, and even Jerusalem, sparking mass panic and pushing Israel to activate its Iron Dome missile defense system at full scale. But this wasn't just a tit-for-tat exchange. The attack spiraled into a full-scale regional war. Militias aligned with Iran, like Hezbollah and various factions in Iraq and Syria, joined the conflict, launching their own attacks on Israel from different fronts. Israel retaliated with more airstrikes, not only on Iranian territory but also on suspected proxy bases in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. The Middle East was on fire, and the world was watching in horror. Global oil prices surged. Refugees started fleeing war zones. And the question on everyone's mind was, is this the beginning of World War III? What started as an attempt to disable Iran's nuclear program turned into a high-risk gamble with unpredictable consequences. And as each day passed, more countries were pulled toward the battlefield. Either directly or by economic and political pressure. This is not just a conflict between two countries, it's a clash of ideologies, national security doctrines, and geopolitical dominance. And the war's beginnings reflect just how fragile global peace can be when diplomacy breaks down. The role of the United States: support or fueling the fire? The United States has long been considered the most influential external power in the Middle East. Over the decades, it has acted as both a mediator in peace talks and a powerful military ally, depending on its interests and leadership. In the case of the Iran-Israel conflict, the role of the U.S. is both crucial and controversial. At the heart of this war lies America's unwavering alliance with Israel. Since the late 20th century, the U.S. has provided Israel with more than $150 billion in military aid, including the latest fighter jets, missile defense systems like the Iron Dome, and real-time satellite intelligence. In return, Israel has been seen as a reliable democratic partner and a counterweight to hostile regimes in the region. When Israel launched its dramatic airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities in 2025, Washington stood firmly behind it. Within hours, the U.S. State Department issued a statement defending Israel's right to self-defense and blaming Iran's nuclear ambitions for triggering the crisis. Shortly afterward, the U.S. announced a fresh round of sanctions against Iran, targeting banks, energy exports, and military suppliers. These sanctions hit an already struggling Iranian economy hard, causing food shortages, energy blackouts, and a sharp rise in inflation. The goal, as Washington claimed, was to pressure Iran into de-escalating. But critics argue that the economic punishment only pushed Iran further into desperation and defiance. Behind the scenes, American warships moved closer to the Persian Gulf, and military bases in Iraq, Qatar, and Bahrain were placed on high alert. The U.S. also reportedly shared real-time satellite intelligence with Israel to help track Iran's movements and intercept missile launches. Though the U.S. hasn't fired a shot, its indirect involvement is undeniable. Yet, not everyone supports this approach. Across the world, and even within America, voices are rising against what some call one-sided diplomacy. International observers, including UN officials, former diplomats, and peace organizations, argue that the U.S. has failed to act as a neutral peacemaker. Instead, by immediately siding with Israel and punishing Iran economically, Washington may have intensified the flames of war rather than extinguished them. Even some members of the U.S. Congress and policy think tanks have warned that a lack of diplomatic balance could trigger wider regional instability. They suggest that had the U.S. used its influence to broker a ceasefire or restart nuclear talks, the war might have been contained before spiraling out of control. On the other hand, defenders of U.S. policy insist that Israel is a democratic ally under existential threat, and that any delay in support could have emboldened Iran and its allies like Hezbollah or even Russia. For them, American involvement is a moral and strategic necessity, to uphold alliances and contain rogue regimes. But this raises a bigger question: is the U.S. supporting peace, or choosing sides in a war that could draw in the entire region, and even the world? What's clear is that the United States stands at a crossroads. Its next moves, military, diplomatic, or economic, will significantly impact not just Iran and Israel, but the global balance of power. The world watches anxiously. Will America step in as a peacemaker or continue down the path of strategic dominance that may fuel a much larger fire? The damage so far: human and economic losses. As the Iran-Israel war continues to unfold, the scale of destruction on both sides has become devastating. Beyond the rockets, airstrikes, and battlefield reports, this conflict has created a humanitarian and economic crisis that is deepening by the hour. The war is not just being fought with missiles, it's being felt in homes, hospitals, markets, and schools. Iran's losses, crippling strikes, and a nation under pressure. Iran has suffered some of the heaviest blows in this conflict so far. Israel's airstrikes were precise, strategic, and devastating. Key targets included Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities at Natanz and Fordow, which were considered vital to its national security and future global leverage. Human losses. Over 500 people have been killed, including dozens of nuclear scientists, military personnel, and more than 200 civilians. Many of the casualties occurred in urban areas where air defense was limited. Thousands more have been injured, with hospitals overflowing and struggling to manage the crisis. Infrastructure damage. Strategic cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Mashhad have been hit hard. Power grids have collapsed in some areas, highways and bridges have been bombed, and government buildings and military command centers have been reduced to rubble. Cyber attacks. In a new front of the war, Israel launched sophisticated cyber assaults on Iranian infrastructure. Internet access has been repeatedly shut down, oil facilities were disabled, and banking systems compromised, paralyzing daily life and communications. Economic collapse. The Iranian economy, already struggling under years of sanctions, is now bleeding billions daily. The national currency is losing value rapidly. Food prices have doubled, fuel shortages are becoming common, and basic goods are disappearing from store shelves. Factories have shut down, international trade has frozen, and foreign investors have pulled out entirely. Civilian impact. Millions of Iranians are now living in constant fear. Schools are closed, air raid sirens ring day and night, and families are crammed into basements for protection. The psychological toll on the population is enormous. While Israel has advanced defense systems like the Iron Dome, the sheer volume and accuracy of Iranian missiles, some guided by drone and satellite technology, have overwhelmed its air defenses. A war without winners. This war is proving that modern conflicts have no clear winners, only widespread loss. Both Iran and Israel are bleeding economically, socially, and emotionally. The loss of life, destruction of cities, and breakdown of economies is creating generational trauma that will last long after the final missile is fired. The damage is not just in buildings and budgets, it's in people's hearts and futures. Parents are burying children. Entire families are being displaced. And both nations are facing the grim reality that recovery will take years, if not decades. The human cost, life under war. While governments make decisions, it's the ordinary people who suffer the most. In both Iran and Israel, citizens are forced to leave their homes and take shelter in underground bunkers, living in fear, uncertainty, and stress about their future, experiencing shortages of food, medicine, and basic utilities, suffering from mental health issues like anxiety and trauma, exposed to misinformation and propaganda through social media and the press. Parents are afraid for their children. Hospitals are overcrowded. Schools and businesses are shut. In the end, the war is breaking families, economies, and the spirit of innocent people. What comes next? Global concerns and future risks. Today, the eyes of the world are on the Middle East. The United Nations, Russia, China, and the European Union have all called for an immediate ceasefire. However, both Iran and Israel continue to push forward with military operations. The US faces international pressure to de-escalate the situation by pushing for peace talks or reducing military involvement. But so far, efforts for a diplomatic solution have failed.